the Irish Sea. So we will retain a very similar setup through Monday afternoon and evening with showers chiefly in the east, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning to you. Good morning. Welcome to a brand new week. You're watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, any minute, Keir Starmer is going to be taken to the stage in Leeds, where he's going to set out his vision for Great Britain, including a swift and decisive abolition of the House of Lords. Would you support that? It's our Twitter poll today at GB News. And also, the long-lasting damage from lockdowns now includes child deaths from Strep A. Let's find out everything that parents need to know about that. Plus, the online safety bill is going through Parliament today. After 4 years, is it now fit for purpose? Plus, Liam Halligan, Amy Nicole and Peter Whittle, plus lots more, all coming up after a look at the latest news.
A very good morning. 1 minute past 10. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. If the Labour Party win the next general election, they'll look at abolishing the House of Lords, calling the current system indefensible. So Keir Starmer will very shortly today set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party are elected. Pledging to provide political and economic devolution at a joint conference in Leeds today, Sir Keir Starmer and the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, will promise to overhaul the way Britain's governed. We're expecting that speech to start very shortly. We'll bring that announcement to you live when it starts. Now, the UK's biggest business groups say there'll be a decade of lost economic growth in Britain if action isn't taken by the government. The CBI forecasts the country's already in recession with rocketing inflation, negative growth and falling productivity. The group say stagflation, a combination of stagnation and rising prices, is preventing firms from investing. The Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, says the RMT's decision to reject an improved pay offer is incredibly disappointing and unfair to the public. A pay rise of 8% and guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024 had been tabled, but the UK's biggest rail union said the deal wouldn't protect its members and would lead to unsafe practices. The strike action's due to go ahead for 4 days this month. Meanwhile, 33,000 members of the Fire Brigades Union will vote today if they should walk out following a 5% pay offer. The FBU say striking is the last resort, but many are desperate, with some struggling to afford to live. Firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embry says they've been left with no option.
We're being asked to take another significant real terms pay cut, and at a time when firefighters, like everybody else across the country, are really struggling to make ends meet. I've been a firefighter for 25 years, and this is the first time really that I've had colleagues say to me they can't afford to buy their kids Christmas presents. They're struggling to pay their mortgage bills, their energy bills, etc. So it's a decision that none of us want to take, but when you consider the paltry pay offer that's been tabled, we've really been left with no other option, frankly.
The government set out plans to overhaul NHS pension rules in an attempt to retain more senior doctors. The proposals would allow staff to claim their pension benefits but continue working and contributing to that pension and remove barriers to retired clinicians returning to work. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the move will help open up extra GP appointments. England will play defending champions France in the World Cup quarter-finals on Saturday. Last night, the Three Lions beat Senegal 3-0 in Qatar. Jordan Henderson scored the first goal. Captain Harry Kane made it 2-0 with his first goal of the tournament, and Bukayo Saka got the third. Now, the England forward Raheem Sterling, though, wasn't present at the game. The 27-year-old's flown back to the UK after armed intruders broke into his home in Surrey while his family were inside. The manager, Gareth Southgate, said family is the most important thing and didn't say whether the Chelsea winger would return to the squad for Saturday's game. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Bev.
Very good morning. This is Bev Turner. Today, we are obviously the channel that brings you all the breaking news. And Keir Starmer is talking this morning in Leeds. I do believe that Gordon Brown is on the stage now. Let's hear what he has to say.
And I want to thank the members of the Commission sitting in the front row here for all the work they have done, representing every region and every nation of our country. Thank you very much for what you have done. For today, what Labour is doing, we are ditching a century of centralisation. We are calling a halt to the over-centralisation of power at the centre that has brought us Conservative sleaze and Conservative scandal, and we're ending the long era of the man in Whitehall somehow knowing best. Now, start from our faith that instead of developing some of the potential of only some of the people in some areas of the country, we can create a United Kingdom that develops all of the potential of all people in all areas of the country. And identified in our report are 288 new economic clusters, 200 of them outside London, in digital, environmental, life science, advanced manufacturing and creative industries. These are the future engines of growth. They cover every city and every region. They are employment hotspots capable of creating tens of thousands of new high-paying jobs around our country. And we show today how mayors and local economic partnerships and local authorities can create the supportive local environment. And so first of all, to link the jobs people need to the companies who need them, we propose 638 job centres transferred from inflexible central control down to local control. To match local skills to local employment needs, the devolution of 200 colleges of education to local control. To finance research and investment urgently needed across this country, and to bridge the regional equity gap facing growing firms, the British Business Bank will be transformed into the British National and Regional Bank, and to build regional transport and infrastructure, we propose joint ventures with the European Investment Bank. But to secure the irreversible transfer of wealth, income and opportunity that we want to see, we also need an irreversible transfer of power. Past devolution settlements, as Tracy has just described, have left the centre unreformed. So to ensure the right powers are in the right places, we must first stop the wrong powers being wielded by the wrong people in the wrong places. And so the new Britain needs a new Westminster, and we need a new Whitehall. In recent years, as you all know, an unreformed centre has been exposed as out of date, out of touch with local needs, out of its depths when it tries to micromanage local events, and all too often out of control. Conflicts of interest, the misuse of power, the abuse of patronage, ethics so unacceptable that this government has lost all its recent ethics advisers. So we've not just to change who makes the decisions, we've got to change the way decisions are made. Now, the starting point of cleaning up our politics is setting forward a mission statement of what the United Kingdom is for. These are our obligations to each other: to deliver free universal healthcare, end poverty, build a sustainable environment, have strong defence and guaranteed security. And with that are new rules so that public servants will always serve the public, enforced by an anti-corruption agency that we propose to investigate wrongdoing, guided by an Integrity and Ethics Commission, as proposed by Angela Rayner, for day-to-day monitoring of standards in public life, and so that it is clear that the era of self-regulation at the centre is over, a citizens' jury representing the public undertaking a regular review of standards in public life, backed up by a ban on all foreign funding of British politics and an end to MPs' second jobs. So we need a clean-up, but we also need a clear-out. 50,000 civil servants transferred out of London to save £200 million, and the first 12 of many agencies that are also candidates of dispersal to save millions of pounds more, to the benefit of all the proposals that Rachel Reeves is making. The replacement of the indefensible 830-member House of Lords with a smaller democratic second chamber, which would be an assembly of the nations and regions that would lose its right to delay ordinary legislation for a year but assume a new function to protect the Constitution. Our message is opportunities for all, unfair privileges for no one. And to ensure we work together in future, we're going to end the standoff between local and national politics, with a new Council of the United Kingdom chaired by the Prime Minister to examine issues of common concern to all parts of the country. Now, in 2016, the British people were promised they would take back control. But it's not the people, but the old Conservative establishment that took back control. And millions of people, both Leave and Remain voters, still feel neglected, ignored, forgotten, invisible to the powers that be, and often left with the feeling that they're being treated as second-class citizens. So as we make clear, Labour is not the old establishment in waiting. It is a new government in waiting, ready to transform Britain. Now, after years of moving apart, devolution in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and then centralisation in England, we are now all talking about empowering local communities. And with a detailed plan to make the UK work for Scotland and Wales, as well as for the regions, we tell both yes and no voters that we can reunite the country. The issue now is no longer independence versus the status quo in Scotland, but change within the UK to benefit Scotland versus change by leaving the UK, which would do damage to Scotland. And so I believe today we can give people hope. Removing the dead hand of centralisation, we are proposing that there will be a government not just of the people and for the people, but a government by the people. For there is a basic truth upon which we build all the recommendations of our report that you will see in detail today. And again, I want to thank all members of the Commission for the work they have done. Wherever you go in Britain, there is talent yet to be developed, ability still to be realised, endless potential waiting to be fulfilled. And conscious of this huge gap today between the Britain we have and the Britain we have it in our power to become, I look forward to a new Britain where there is equality in opportunity and fairness in outcome, a new Britain led by the Labour Party, a new Britain led by Keir Starmer, whom I introduce to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon, and thanks to all of you for coming this morning. I can see so many faces here. It's fantastic to be back at Leeds University, where I spent 3 happy years. And thank you to the Commission members who've joined us this morning as well. And thank you, Tracy. You're doing an incredible job here in West Yorkshire, protecting the safety of women and girls, cheaper and better buses, making this region a hub of green industry. But I know that you could do so much more. I know that businesses here, people here, communities here could do so much more. But you're being held back by a system that hoards power in Westminster, a system which smugly thinks it knows what skills, transport, planning and job support West Yorkshire needs better than the people who live here. I've long been convinced that this broken model has held back our politics and held back our economy. And I'm determined we unbind ourselves and free our potential. Britain is one of the most centralised systems in Europe, and the centre has not delivered. Now, I don't want it to fall apart. I want us to build something new. Anyone can see what's happening in the UK today. We have an unbalanced economy, one which makes too little use of the talents of too few people in too few places, and which the Tories have dragged into a vicious cycle of low growth and high taxes.
Can you get me a pen, Andy?
Faced with this narrow path of stagnation, is it any surprise that people up and down the country are crying out for a new approach? Now, during the Brexit referendum, I argued for Remain. But I couldn't disagree with the basic case that lots of Leave voters made to me. They wanted more control over their lives, more control over their country. They wanted to create opportunities for the next generation, build communities they felt proud of, have public services they could rely on. And I know that in the Scottish referendum in 2014, many of those who voted yes did so for similar reasons. The same frustrations at a Westminster system that seems remote. The same yearning for the chance to build a fairer future for themselves and their families. People know Britain needs change, but they're never going to get it from the Tories, who talk about levelling up, but refuse to move power away from Westminster, who once promised a stronger union, but can't work with or for Scotland, and who think that the only route to prosperity is to make the rich richer and hope that somehow it trickles down to everyone else. To build the future our country deserves means change. It means higher standards in public life, a wider spread of power and opportunity, and better economic growth that benefits everyone wherever they are. No more navel gazing or facing inwards. Higher, wider, better. That is how Britain must set its sights. And I'm determined that with Labour, that's exactly what we will do. That's why I asked Gordon and the Commission to carry out a report on the future of the UK. I asked them to put together proposals for the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to the British people, so that if Labour wins the next election, Britain will see a change not just in who governs, but how we are governed. The tools to a fairer society and a stronger economy placed directly in the hands of working people. So together we can build an economy not just for the many, but by the many and of the many. Now, redistribution is a good thing, but it's not a one-word plan for a fair society or a strong economy. By empowering our towns, cities, regions and nations to work together on local growth plans, Labour will reignite our economy. New powers over skills, transport, planning and culture, all helping to drive growth by developing hundreds of clusters of economic activity. Labour will rebuild trust by reforming the centre of government, cleaning up sleaze, nourishing the relationship between central government and the devolved authorities, and replacing the unelected House of Lords with a new, smaller, democratically elected second chamber. Not only less expensive, but also representing the regions and nations of the United Kingdom. And Labour will reunite our country with new missions based on our shared values and priorities, cooperating to tackle climate change and addressing inequality, giving Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and the regions of England new status and louder, prouder voices in a reformed and modern United Kingdom. I want to thank Gordon and the Commission for their work. They've put forward a compelling vision of how we can break Britain's economic and political malaise, how we can restore trust to British politics, how we can offer a fairer, greener future to the whole of our United Kingdom. That vision is underpinned by serious and bold recommendations, and these will now be a matter of public consultation, so they can be tested, refined and made ready for implementation. We will set out our final plans in our manifesto. And I invite everyone who wants to build that fairer, greener future to get involved. Whether you voted Leave or Remain, yes or no, live in a city or town, we will make common cause with you. Together we will forge something bold, something modern, something hopeful. Together we will build a better future. Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to take some questions from the media, and I know it's been a race with the trains to see who arrived and what order they arrived, but I'm going to do my best on who I know and think is here. Beth from Sky, can we take you first? I can see you've arrived safely.
Just about got here. Keir Starmer, at a time when people are struggling to pay their bills, feed their families and are striking over pay settlements, you've produced a 155-page report talking about devolution, constitutional reform and abolishing the House of Lords. This might look to many people as completely out of touch, and you could look like another politician talking to Westminster about stuff that might never come to pass. Can you give me one thing in this report that would improve people's lives from day one of a Labour government? And if I may, to Gordon Brown, Nicola Sturgeon has declared the next election a de facto independence referendum. You talk about further devolution, but hasn't the horse already bolted? And do you accept that Scotland could become an independent nation in your lifetime or mine? Thank you.
Beth, the complete opposite of the proposition you put to me. This is vitally important. If we ask ourselves in this room across the country, what is the single biggest thing that's holding us back? It's failure of economic growth over the last 12 years. I profoundly believe that amongst the causes for that is because we have not allowed and empowered every part of our country to play its part in building our economy. We've relied far too much on London and the South East. We have not let the whole country play its part. This addresses that question. And I can tell you, wherever I am across the country, whether it's Burnley, Hull, Blackpool, Stirling, Sunderland, Southampton, everybody I meet, and so do my shadow cabinet, they meet communities and businesses and people that say, we've got ideas, we've got innovation, we want our community and our place to be even better than it is. We just need a government that shares our ambition, shares our vision for the future. So this could not be more relevant. And, you know, I'm fed up to the back teeth with sticking plasters for the problems that we've got. The underlying problem is our economy isn't working. This is a strong, compelling set of recommendations that do what politicians have all agreed needs to be done, but nobody's actually done it, which is to be bold enough to say, well, we've got to stop those in Westminster and Whitehall pretending that they know best about the communities that desperately want to play their part in the future. We're going to transfer that power to them, rebuild our economy. And I don't think this is the complete opposite of a discussion in Westminster. It's accepting that Westminster is not the place for those decisions to be made. They've got to be made elsewhere. Gordon, can I bring you in on the second element of that?
Just as in 2016, a lot of people voted for Brexit because they thought that was their only chance of change. In 2014, a lot of people voted for independence because they thought that was the only change on offer. We are changing that entirely today. We are breaking new ground. The ground on which the battle is fought in Scotland is changing forever, because what we are saying is we are offering change within the UK that will benefit Scotland, as against change by leaving the United Kingdom, which we think will do damage to Scotland. And that's going to be the debate from now on in, not change, not independence versus the status quo, but change within Britain versus change by leaving Britain. And the measures, of course, we're putting forward to give more power to Scotland and to Wales and to the regions and localities and communities of England all go hand in hand and are in the same direction together. So when you come to the next election, it may be that the Scottish National Party will have a one-line manifesto and want a one-issue general election. But I tell you this, we have done a huge amount of research on Scottish public opinion, and people want a better health service immediately. People want living standards improved immediately. People want jobs for young people immediately. People want better housing immediately. And people, of course, want change in the way that we are suggesting immediately. And that's going to be the issue on which we fight. We are offering a plan for economic, social, political and constitutional reform, not a one-issue election.
Thank you.
Mr. Starmer, sorry, just if I may be a bit cheeky and ask us a quick follow-up. I asked you which policy in this report from day one will change people's lives, because it's so amorphous. What's the one thing that you're going to do, the most important thing in that report that will change all of our lives?
Devolving power in relation to skills, education, transport, resources, finances into our local communities so that they can help us grow the economy. There are so many examples of this. You've got video games in Dundee, you've got ceramics in the Midlands, you've got creative media in Bristol and Bath. Hydrogen could be what the North East revitalises around. There are so many examples. I think we've got 288 economic clusters. If we were able to transfer power in this way and get those clusters to operate, it would bring about a huge change everywhere, including here in Leeds. That would, if we were to...
Good morning. You are watching and listening to GB News. That was Keir Starmer. You could hear talking in the background. This is Bev Turner today. We've been listening to Labour heavyweight, Gordon Brown there, of course, former PM, and also Sir Keir Starmer, talking in Leeds, announcing the findings of their Commission on UK's Future report. It isn't the sexiest title ever, but what did you think of what was contained therein? Well, with me listening to this, to have our response this morning is Amy Nicol, who also went to Leeds University, where Keir Starmer went, as he announced there, and the director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle. Right, guys, we sat here with our coffees, taking that in. There was quite a lot to digest. For me, Peter, it was a speech from both of them actually combined, which was about the themes of this transfer of wealth. Gordon Brown was saying, you cannot have an irreversible transfer of wealth without an irreversible transfer of power. He was talking about devolving a lot of this decision-making process into regions. He was saying, how can somebody in Westminster know what is right for the people of West Yorkshire? He's got a point, hasn't he?
I don't really think so. I think it's sort of, in a way, you can't disagree with anything that was said, because it was essentially very cliched and very, very general. And, of course, this is like a kind of proposal programme, isn't it? It's not. There aren't any sort of direct, apart from the House of Lords, there aren't any detailed proposals. Who cannot disagree with regions having more power? Who cannot disagree with any of that? Very few people would. I do feel, I can't help feeling, and I think one of the questions there, actually, that we saw brought that up, is that it felt that there are many more immediate problems facing the country at the moment, rather than, if you like, concentrating on what might be called constitutional matters. Having said that, I mean, I'm with him on the House of Lords, for example. I think that's not even a particularly radical view anymore, simply because a lot of parties believe the House of Lords should go.
The Conservatives aren't advocating for that, are they?
Oh, no, they're not. They're not. But, I mean, other parties, I think, like the SDP, I think, the Reform Party, or the smaller parties are.
Yeah.
And also, it's been in the air, hasn't it, for quite a long time, really, with the House of Lords.
It was very much a sort of drain the swamp. It was slightly Trump-esque in terms of talking about getting rid of the corruption in Westminster.
Yeah, that's slightly opportunistic. Yeah, of course, there's corruption. And we've seen some sleaze and everything.
Some
obviously, hang on, they're actually obviously making, you know, some political hay there. Fair enough. That's what politicians do.
That will go down well at the moment.
It will go down well. All I would say is this, my main point is this, is that, to me, it's the wrong emphasis. What people want is not so much huge amount more power. They just want strong politicians. We have terrible, weak politicians in all parties now. Yeah. They want strong politicians who have different views and are not viewed as simply being interchangeable. That is actually, that's the main thing that frustrates people now.
Well, strong politicians, Amy, they have Gordon Blair. Gordon Brown. Gordon Blair, there you go. There's the Freudian slip, right? They have Gordon Brown there, which really does suggest that there still is nobody new coming through from Labour. I know that he was in charge of this report, I get that, but surely the Labour Party have more impressive people to turn out on a day like today than just rolling out Gordon Brown.
Yeah, and I think what that did there was it made us all very nostalgic for Gordon Brown, didn't it? Because he is a stalwart. That was...
You are kidding.
Well, I have to say, as much as I don't necessarily agree, but there was a sense of there's a grown-up in the room.
Yeah.
Compared to what we've seen quite a lot of the last couple of years.
When I see Gordon Brown, I feel in a safe pair of hands. And then when Keir came on, it was a bit like the main event wasn't quite as good as the support act.
It was a bit like... I think what was wrong is having him down there. It's almost like he's saying, what Keir means to say
what he really meant was this, to have them both answering
like
questions.
A parent who says...
I wouldn't say that. I'd say like a mentor. An advisor.
But we don't want the work experience guy to potentially be Prime Minister.
That's not the case. It's the case that now we have two very powerful, very capable men at the helm there that we've just seen. And I think that set out a very bold plan with a lot of conviction. And I think if you don't do the reforms, if you don't look at the House of Lords, and if you don't look at for example, the way they've talked about Scotland, we do need a strong, equal, mutual union. And at the moment, it looks like we're not going to get that. These are really important points. And if you're going to streamline and reform and clean up Westminster, then that will feed into all the things you're saying about the bread and butter politics. Without reforming it from the centre, you're never going to get to the bread and butter politics because it's going to be all caught up in what we've seen since 2019, which has been lost all faith in any ethics, in any chance of a clean Westminster, Boris Johnson has come in and he's had more lies, more emphasis on his personal life, what's going on with him, than what's going on with the country.
Was there enough meat on the bones for you, though, Amy? It was like Peter was saying, there was quite a lot of cliches. It was quite brushstroke. We want new Britain, a new Whitehall. It's out of date, out of touch, out of control. There were these quite nice little sound bites in there, but was it just all hot air with nothing to really grasp hold of?
Well, I don't think without that fundamental changes that they've discussed there, addressing the bloated civil service, slimming down, modernising Westminster, you need to have the clean slate to make the bigger changes. And I think this set out a clean slate. And I
Funny
found
thing
it very
is, therefore,
exciting.
actually, I mean, is that what you could say is that, therefore, he's actually talking directly to Westminster when he was talking there, not the substance of his speech. If you look, he's actually delivering messages to Westminster. You know, about the civil service, about corruption. This thing about MPs, you know, having second jobs, I think. To me, I actually don't mind if they have second jobs so long as they're good MPs.
No, but they're not being good MPs. And the impact of this situation in Westminster is what's making it very hard for the electorate and is making things a mess outside Westminster.
I don't think it's because they have second jobs.
I think that has a bit of a role
I don't think
to
so,
play.
because if you go back, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, we've had great MPs who did second jobs. I think what this is tinkering, if you like, with all the mechanics, and fine, you should tinker with mechanics, but the ultimate thing is that people feel, I think, the huge, whether on Labour or Conservative, that we have got really low-calibre politicians.
I think it points out the hypocrisy with a lot of these people making our legislation, putting it through the House of Lords. Because if you take, for example, they're saying, oh, a nurse will be fine. She's on 25 grand a year or whatever. Nurses don't have time for second jobs. So MPs are not practising what they preach in any way. And I think it shows that
doesn't follow at all.
I think because they're completely out of touch.
It doesn't follow at all. No, the point is that MPs always could, you know, like if they were lawyers or if they ran a business or indeed other things, they could still do that. I just think it doesn't mean to say that they are going to be worse politicians. If anything, you could say that the calibre of politicians has gone down in the era of real professional political, politicians that we have now. People who've never done anything else in their life. That's, and we've got that in a big way.
Disagree with that.
OK. Peter Whittle, Amy Nicole, you're going to be here this morning. Let me know what you think, won't you, of the speech there this morning by Sir Keir Starmer and Gordon Brown as well. And also vote in our Twitter poll. We've taken that one element that is perhaps something that we can actually hang our hat on, is the fact that Sir Keir Starmer said it's time to abolish the House of Lords in his plan for a new Britain. Do you agree? So far, 69% of you are saying yes. We're going to be discussing that in a little bit more detail. Also, send me all your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. After the news, the online safety bill is going through Parliament today. There have been concerns about the bill restricting freedom of speech, but for campaigners who want to keep children safe online, it's a crucial part of legislation. That's all after the morning news with Rosie.
A very good morning. It's 10:34. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election, describing the current system as indefensible. Sir Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to the nations and regions if his party comes to power. Pledging to provide political and economic devolution at a joint conference in Leeds, the Labour leader and the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown promised to overhaul the way the country's governed. The Transport Secretary Mark Harper says the RMT's decision to reject an improved pay offer is incredibly disappointing and unfair to the public. A pay rise of 8% and a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024 had been tabled. But the UK's biggest rail union says the deal wouldn't protect its members and would lead to unsafe practices. Meanwhile, 30,000 members of the Fire Brigades Union are voting on industrial action following a 5% pay offer. The FBU says a strike is the last resort, but many firefighters are desperate, with some struggling, they say, to afford to live. The UK's biggest business group says there will be a decade of lost economic growth in Britain if action isn't taken by the government. The CBI says it's likely the country's already in recession, with rocketing inflation, negative growth and failing productivity. England will play defending champions France in the World Cup quarter-final on Saturday. It's after the Three Lions comfortably beat Senegal 3-0 last night in Qatar. Jordan Henderson, captain Harry Kane and Bukayo Saka all scored. However, England forward Raheem Sterling wasn't at the game. The 27-year-old has flown back to the UK after armed intruders broke into his home while his family were inside. The manager, Gareth Southgate, says family is the most important thing and didn't say whether the Chelsea winger will return to the squad for Saturday's game. We're on your TV, online, DAB+ radio. You're up to date on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it is 10:39. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, the Business Secretary Grant Shapps has announced a review into tackling late payments for small businesses. He's urged larger companies to pay their smaller suppliers promptly as they are an essential cog in our economy. Now, it's been a really tough time, and it still is for small businesses and the high street recently. And I'm delighted to be joined now in the studio to find out what it is like for those people running a business. Steph Douglas, she's the founder and CEO of Don't Buy Her Flowers, and alongside of GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan. Steph, lovely to see you. Now, tell us about Don't Buy Her Flowers. Why did you start it and when? What's that journey been like as a business owner?
So I had my first baby in 2010 and I received 8 bunches of flowers, and they were all really well meant, and they were for me to say well done and everything else. But anyone that's had a baby will know that it's quite hard and quite overwhelming, and flowers take looking after.
So you've got something else to look after.
Yeah, it's another thing to look after when you're probably feeling really, really spent and a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So Don't Buy Her Flowers is an online gift business, and we started as gifts for new mums, and it's developed to include loads of occasions, bereavement, get well, we work with Stand Up to Cancer. But the whole point is about thoughtfulness. So you can put something together bespoke and you handpick products, which we've got over 250 products from British businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, and you put together something really bespoke and thoughtful.
It sounds so easy, Steph. I bet it's been a dream, hasn't it? It's been a luxurious 8 years, sat with your feet up, seeing kids now.
Well, the first 2 years I was packing boxes on my bedroom floor. And then I took on a warehouse in Gloucestershire, where I'm from, and my brother heads up the warehouse there, and we've built a team there. So, actually the first years up until, so it's been 8 years, the first years up until the pandemic were really steady growth, incremental growth. We didn't take any investment. And then actually it went bonkers with the pandemic. So we were
all the shops were closed, right?
All the shops were closed, and people were looking to be thoughtful and for human connection and all the things that we do really well. So that was a really strange time to be having such success. And then that kind of went on for quite a lot of that 2 years. And then things have got tougher since probably April time, when lots of talk around energy crisis. I would say that's when we sort of saw costs really going up as well in the last couple of years. But that's when things started to impact our customers more.
Yeah. This, Liam Halligan, is a very typical story, isn't it, for business owners? Some people had an actual bump during the pandemic for various market reasons, and now it's tough. Why is it so hard at the moment for businesses?
Well, Steph's an example of the absolutely brilliant SME sector we have in the UK, small and medium-sized enterprises. A lot of them started literally on kitchen tables, people seeing a gap in the market, not satisfied with what they're receiving from business, so they start their own. And the Brits are really good at this stuff. Small and medium-sized enterprises account for half our GDP growth, 2/3 of our employment. They're a real powerhouse.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it's really tough for SMEs, particularly on this late payment issue, because if I owe you 100 quid, right? I'm a big company, you're a small company, I owe you 100 quid. The longer I wait to pay you that 100 quid, the less that 100 quid is worth in inflation terms. And so late payment always escalates during times of inflation. And a lot of big companies, frankly, bully smaller companies, squeeze their subcontractors. It happens particularly in the construction industry notoriously, but it happens across the board as well. And that's why the government is at least putting out a review saying we feel your pain. Big businesses must, look after their small businesses. But look, I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, a guy called Michael Heseltine, who was then president of the Board of Trade, said this is recognised business practice. This is what happens in business. There's no legislation. Small firms, it's too expensive to go to the small claims court. They haven't got time. They're trying to keep the business together. And I'm afraid, whatever the business secretary now says, he will know, as I've often pointed out, that the worst late payer in the country to small businesses is the government.
Is that right, Steph? Do you recognise that picture, that relationship between the big suppliers and a smaller company like you can be problematic?
Yeah, because you're so grateful and excited about, all orders mean so much. But I think when you've potentially got a bigger contract in play, then you want to do everything you can to make that work because of the potential of that.
Of course.
And so they do hold the power then.
Right. What do you need the government to do now as a small business?
I think, if there were any more stability economically, politically, that makes a huge impact. We see it. You see it straight away when there's lots of stuff going on in the media. You see that follow through with how much traffic you get to the website. And customers, and lots of people won't have as much money at the moment, but there'll also be people who have got money, but everybody kind of goes into this freeze mode.
Because we're nervous.
Because we're
not sure what's
nervous.
coming around the corner, what's my electricity bill going to be next month, I'm not going to splash out on someone buy a gift. Do you see yourself very much as the luxury market for gifts?
You can put a package together for kind of £30, and people are always going to be looking for the occasions that we send gifts for. So there's always going to be people who have been going through a rubbish time or bereaved or birthday. So there are still people looking, but they're probably just harder to find at the moment.
Yeah. What about staffing? Because that's what we talked about quite a lot, isn't it, Liam? That the staff shortage in this country, that we can't find enough people to do the jobs. Is that something that you're struggling with?
I think the hospitality sector is seeing it more than we are. Our warehouse is based in Gloucestershire, and we've been really lucky. And actually, like during the pandemic, we had loads of people who were furloughed or who had lost jobs. So we were able to kind of employ people, which is great. And I think what you're saying about the number of people that are employed by small businesses is really overlooked. So I think sometimes we're kind of patted on the head.
Yeah.
And not the amount we contribute isn't really
I'm full of admiration for you, I must say. I come from a small business background. You know, my family ran a small business literally from the kitchen table. Late payment, you know, almost tore our family apart. It was absolutely terrible thing. And look, small business leaders like Steph and the people who work for them, they're often swing voters. They're very pragmatic, talented people. They won't be pushed around. They are key in any general election, as well as being key to keeping our economy going. And at the moment, I'd say both the main parties are not giving a great offer to our small and medium-sized businesses. Look, the Tories are putting corporation tax up from 19 to 25%. There are some allowances, but a lot of small businesses will be hammered by that. 6% taken off their margin after they've just been hammered by lockdown. On top of that, a lot of small firms, a tax they really don't like paying is business rates. You pay a tax on the value of your premises, your business premises, any equipment that you buy, and you pay that even if you don't take in any revenue, even if you don't make any profit at all, you have to pay that. And it's a lot of money, and a lot of small businesses want more business rates relief. Labour, in fairness, are putting that forward, but they're not saying how they're going to pay for it.
Steph, you don't have shops, do you? Yours is all entirely online.
All online.
I bet you're very relieved about that now, right?
Yeah.
Have there been times when you considered having a shop frontage for Don't Buy Her Flowers?
Yeah, we've talked about it because I think the experience of hand-picking everything that people do with our website would be a lovely experience, but I'm very glad that we haven't. And also, what we are looking at the moment is kind of, and I think something that small businesses are really good at is diversifying. So we've got this amazing warehouse and amazing team who have been really tested in the last couple of years. And so we started doing fulfilment for other small businesses. And I think something that that small businesses do really well is go, right, OK, what can I do?
Yeah.
And that's where we're focused.
Yeah.
So you're packing goods for other small firms because they haven't got your infrastructure.
Well, they might be doing it on their kitchen table and actually they want to get to that next step, but it's really hard and it's really expensive to take on a person, take on
And yet here you are, a very successful person, brilliant what you're doing. You're thinking about, maybe we should get a shop, maybe we shouldn't. That would revitalise a high street. And people aren't taking the shop fronts because of the business rates, because of the other taxation. That's good for your business now. Chapeau to you. But what about the coffee bars, the cafes, the restaurants that rely on those high streets being revitalised?
And the people who go to the high streets, like the little old lady that goes down, you know, has her coffee. Right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Steph Douglas from Don't Buy Her Flowers, Liam Halligan, you know him. Right, let me know what you think as well. If you are a small business owner, do let me know how hard it is at the moment. And can you relate to what Steph and Liam were just saying there? You've been getting in touch about Keir Starmer and what he was saying this morning. He was talking in Leeds about his vision, the Labour Party's vision for the UK, and he was saying that one of the things he would do quite swiftly would be to abolish the House of Lords. Mail in Sunderland has said, in theory, that's a good idea, and it will save money. In practice, it will be replaced by something else, which will no doubt cost more. You're feeling a bit gloomy today, aren't you, Mel? I know how you feel. And Mike says, I get very scared when I hear of any Labour proposals, even more scared when I see people like Gordon Brown proposing them. And Nicholas said, the House of Lords is not fit for purpose anymore. It does not serve the country. Now, something that you've heard me talk about quite a lot, because I do think it's incredibly important, and it's incredibly important we get it right, is the online safety bill. It's back in Parliament today. Last month, ministers said that the encouragement of self-harm would be criminalised if the bill reaches the statute book. Culture Secretary Michelle Donnellan has confirmed that a controversial clause deeming content legal but harmful would be scrapped. So what are the pros and cons? I am delighted to say that joining me to discuss this now are John Carr, OBE, the Secretary of the UK Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety, Professor Andrew Tettenborn, a writer at The Spectator, and joining me in the studio, the director of Big Brother Watch, Silky Carlo. Lovely to see you all this morning. Right, there's a lot to get through here. John, would you welcome the bill in its current form now?
Pretty much. I mean, we haven't actually seen the final text yet, but from everything we're hearing from what the government is saying, it's sounding like it's in better shape than it was.
OK, Andrew, how do you think the Conservatives feel about this bill on the whole? It's been bubbling away, I think, for about 4 years now. Obviously, the pandemic did put things temporarily on hold a little bit. But what's the general sense around whether it's got the tone right?
My own feeling is that there are really two bits of this bill. The one bit protecting children, which, if we can possibly do it, we must. The other bit protecting adults, which I'm still very worried about.
What do you mean? Which bit concerns you?
The one protecting adults, provided that we can find a way of protecting children from access to this kind of material. And that may be easier said than done, but provided we can, I'm all for it. When it comes to protecting adults, OK, they've got rid of the idea that you have to remove stuff that's legal but harmful, and that's absolutely right. But I still think that as the bill is now, there will be a very considerable chilling effect. Because if you look at it, what it says is not that you must take down material legal but harmful, but that you must give adults the right to opt out of it. Now, the problem there is that anybody with a remotely controversial website is likely to find that social media will play safe. They will say, got to opt in to receive material from it. That's actually going to make life very difficult for anyone who wants to get across a controversial message to adults. So that's one of the reasons I'm worried.
OK, Silky, Carlo, you know this bill inside and out. Big Brother Watch has played an important part in lobbying for changes and keeping an eye on it. How happy are you with where it's at now?
Well, we welcomed the removal of this whole invention of a speech category that's legal but harmful, that can be suppressed as though it were illegal. But really, the bill has taken a step forward and 2 steps back. I think everyone agrees, of course, that children have to be protected online and that this is a bill that needs to be gotten right if it's going to go ahead in the form that it is. But there's so much wrong with it that it's hard to imagine how this can progress in a way that doesn't really damage free speech. Essentially, what the bill is doing is converging the power of state censors and Silicon Valley censors. What's been promised in the new bill is that state regulators will be making sure that the companies enforce their terms and conditions vigilantly all the time. That might sound benign, of course they should uphold their promises, but when we see that the content policies mean that anyone who questioned anything around lockdowns and the pandemic was being booted off, gender critical feminists and trans people on both sides of the debate are being kicked off, all these controversial topics, people were being censored and having their accounts deleted, sometimes with career impact, journalists, for example. This is the kind of stuff that's really sticky water. Do we want to see state regulators saying, yes, these companies must enforce these actions? I think we want to see a bit more separation of powers. It's quite chilling to see 2 massive sites of power converge in this way.
John, I'd like to bring you in. You're shaking your head. Yeah. What did you not agree with there?
I am shaking my head. Listen, the terms and conditions of service, that's to say the basis on which you agree to join or use a service, have been with us since the beginning of the internet. The problem has been that far too many internet companies have done absolutely nothing to enforce them. So in effect, what they're doing is engaging in false advertising. They've published a misleading prospectus. If a company says racism is not allowed on our site or service, misogyny is not allowed on our site or service, bullying is not allowed on our site or service, then I think it's perfectly reasonable for anybody to expect them to ensure that that is reflected in the reality of that service. Up to now, it hasn't been on anything like an adequate scale. Look at poor Molly Hawkins and what happened to her. No, sorry, Molly Russell and what happened to her.
So she was the young girl She was the young girl who lost her life, and the coroner did conclude that self-harm, of which she had learnt about on the internet, played a part in that. Andrew, parents have to also make sure that we have a responsibility for our children, don't we? We can't just outsource parenting to the internet and expect the government and big business to do that for us.
I certainly think that's right. Parents do have a part to play, but I think they have a right to expect at least something from the government as regards what their children see. I'm a little bit worried about what John says about always enforcing the terms of business. If I'm an adult and I sign up to a social media site which says no racism or sexism, and I find it's full of racism or sexism, I can turn to what my uncle used to call the best invention of modern times, which is the off switch. I don't have to look at it. Now, when it comes to children, I'm all for providing that protection. I really don't see that it's necessary when the surfers are adult.
Silky, is it possible, though? How do we master that? Is it age verification? But if it's age verification, aren't we giving away an awful lot of our identity to somebody online, and that has a security risk with it?
Well, I want to come back to John's point first of all. What he's talking about is the relationship between somebody who uses the service and the service. Let's bear in mind, these terms and conditions are not good for human rights. In many cases, they're not actually good for child safety. And so you're asking for the state regulators to enforce those. These are terms and conditions that are designed to protect the companies, not the users. They're not written in the same way with the precision that the rule of law has. The only role that the state should be playing in the online world is ensuring that the law, criminal law, is upheld. And actually, there are tens of thousands of pieces of seriously harmful content and illegal content of child sex abuse that the companies are surfacing every single year that the police do not have the resources to deal with. That's what should be focused on. And I'm really surprised that children's campaigners aren't absolutely raising the roof that this is something that is not in the bill. The bill is all about lawful content and making Silicon Valley into speech police rather than growing the role of and the resourcing for policing to deal with the serious illegal content that actually is online.
John, last word to you.
I simply don't accept the proposition that companies are allowed to advertise themselves as doing one thing and then do something completely different.
OK. All right, all three of you, thank you very much. I'm not sure we managed to conclude whether this is going to be good or who it will be good for. It's a huge issue. It will be back in Parliament today. John Carr, OBE, Secretary of the UK Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety, and Professor Andrew Tattenborn, writer at Spectator, and also Big Brother Watch, Silky Carlo. Right, let me know what you think. I do think it's something we have a huge responsibility to get right. OK, that is the first end of the hour. We're going to be back after this short break.
Right.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Labour leader Keir Starmer has revealed new plans for an overhaul of the Constitution and to replace the House of Lords. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Scarlet fever in children is on the rise following a surge in cases driven by Strep A infections. Health officials have urged parents to look out for symptoms in their children. We're going to be discussing what you need to know all about Strep A and should you really be as worried as the papers are making out. And thousands of drivers in Birmingham have got away scot-free over the controversial Clean Air Zone fines. All coming up after a look at your latest news.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Labour says it's going to look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election, describing the current system as indefensible. So Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party's elected. Launching a report which was led by the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, he promised to overhaul the way the country's governed.
If Labour wins the next election, Britain will see a change not just in who governs, but how we are governed. The tools to a fairer society and a stronger economy placed directly in the hands of working people. So together we can build an economy not just for the many, but by the many and of the many.
The UK's biggest business group says there'll be a decade of lost economic growth in Britain if action isn't taken by the government. The CBI forecasts the country's already in recession with rocketing inflation, negative growth and failing productivity. The group says stagflation, it's a combination of stagnation and rising prices, is preventing firms from investing. The Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, says the RMT's decision to reject an improved pay offer is incredibly disappointing and unfair to the public. A pay rise of 8% and a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024 had been tabled. But the UK's biggest rail union said the deal wouldn't protect its members and would lead to unsafe practices. The strike action's due to go ahead for 4 days this month. Meanwhile, 33,000 members of the Fire Brigades Union will vote today if they should walk out following a 5% pay offer. The FBU says striking is the last resort, but that many were desperate and some were struggling to afford to live. Firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embry says they've been left with no option.
We're being asked to take another significant real terms
pay cut, and at a time when firefighters, like everybody else across the country, are really struggling to make ends meet. I've been a firefighter for 25 years, and this is the first time really that I've had colleagues say to me they can't afford to buy their kids Christmas presents. They're struggling to pay their mortgage bills, their energy bills, etc. So it's a decision that none of us want to take. But when you consider the paltry pay offer we've been that's been tabled, we've really been left with no other option, frankly.
The government set out plans to overhaul NHS pension rules in an attempt to retain more senior doctors. The proposals would allow staff to claim their pension benefits but continue working and contributing to that pension, and also remove barriers to retired clinicians returning to work. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the move will help open up extra GP appointments. England forward Raheem Sterling's flown back to the UK after armed intruders broke into his home. Surrey police say watches and jewellery were stolen, but confirmed the Chelsea winger's family weren't in the house at the time of the robbery. The manager, Gareth Southgate, says family is the most important thing and didn't say whether the Chelsea winger will return to the squad for Saturday's game against France. And England will play defending champions France in the World Cup quarter-finals on Saturday. It's after they comfortably beat Senegal 3-0 last night in Qatar. Jordan Henderson, captain Harry Kane and Bukayo Saka all scored. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops. Now back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. We're going to be getting stuck into Keir Starmer's new plan. He's promised this in about the last hour, a transfer of power, he said, to the British people under a Labour government. Will he stick to these promises? Let me know what you think. A lot of you are very much in support of him scrapping the House of Lords. We're going to be discussing fines in Birmingham, as the City Council have written off over 40,000 fines in relation to their controversial Clean Air Zone. What does this suggest about the council's priorities? And I'm going to be joined by my fantastic commentators in about 20 minutes for analysis of the day's biggest stories, including extracts from Matt Hancock's diaries over the weekend. Did you see those? There was a lot in there that we need to discuss. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Today on Twitter, we've got a poll asking you. So Keir Starmer thinks it's time to abolish the House of Lords in his plan for Britain. Do you agree? Please do cast your vote. Email me also on gbviews@gbnews.uk to give me your thoughts on anything else that we're discussing today. Now, on to this speech that Sir Keir Starmer made this morning at the top of this show. He unveiled his vision for the UK under his watch. He said he wants to reunite the country by devolving power to local authorities and decision makers. He's outlined plans to create 288 clusters of economic growth with a new Britain, he says, and a new Whitehall. So are you happy with what he had to say this morning with that vision? Joining me now is political commentator and former politician Suzanne Evans. Suzanne, lovely to see you.
Good morning, Bev.
What did you make of Keir Starmer's vision for the Great Britain under Labour? Was it just cliche, or were there some genuinely significant infrastructural change that he was describing?
Well, I think it's very interesting. It read like a kind of almost a wish list for people that aren't very fond of politicians. Abolish the House of Lords, give more power to local government. But then you read between the lines and it's not quite all it is made out to be. He's not going to abolish the House of Lords. He's simply going to reform it. So anyone getting too excited, I'm afraid, about waving goodbye to the peers who they might not like in the House of Lords are going to be on a hiding to nothing here. Remember, Tony Blair reformed the House of Lords once before and there were high hopes for major reform. It didn't happen. He got rid of the hereditary peers. I suspect Keir Starmer will probably want to go further and get rid of the bishops as well. And we'll have an elected House of Lords. But how will that work in practice? Who's going to be put up for election? It's going to be the party faithful. It's going to be the favoured people. I really don't see much difference, to be honest, with it as it now. The fact is the House of Lords is far too big. It certainly needs to be slimmed down. But I think having that second chamber that in some respects has a little bit less political weight to it. And many people are there because they have been involved in politics, but they're they're also there for very good reasons, and they're not necessarily, they're crossbenchers who aren't necessarily linked to a political party. And I think that element of independence is good. So I don't think Keir Starmer's reforms are probably going to be for the better. And as far as his moves towards more power for local people, I think that's a disaster, frankly. It's just going to mean that every single area in the country is a postcode lottery. Remember, Bev, how difficult it was when in COVID times, when you were in different parts of the country and you had different rules and you didn't know what you were supposed to be doing wherever you were, be that England, Scotland, or the different tiers that we had. I think this is a similar thing that we're going to see here. You're going to have different parts of the country subject to different rules and regulations, and I think it's a recipe for disaster, frankly. It's also an abdication of responsibility by Westminster. We pay
going to be very popular, though, Suzanne? I mean, if we're saying that this speech was about the fact that a lot of people don't like politicians, which is true, and then you're saying, actually, he's already lied to us by saying that he wants to abolish the House of Lords. This is the headlines that's all over the media, but he's not actually saying that, then surely he's undermining his own position, because it very much was a drain the swamp kind of speech. We've got to get rid of corruption. We've got to slim down the House of Lords. We've got to, put all the power in the hands of the local people. He said, why would somebody in Westminster know what somebody in West Yorkshire needs? He's kind of got a point, hasn't he?
Well, he has, but if it's corruption you want to get rid of in politics, I'm afraid you're not going to get rid of that by making even more layers of political office. So at the moment, we have 650 MPs in Westminster. I lose track of how many peers we have in the House of Lords. We have umpteen local councillors, far too many. You have regional governments, you have devolved governments. Oh, OK, let's just spend several hundred million more of taxpayers' money bringing in yet another layer of government that's going to be expensive, that's going to require staffing, that's going to require offices. At the end of the day, what this is going to mean, Beverly, is less money for local people. And I think there's also, some of the things that are going to happen are going to be quite worrying. We've seen, for instance, Oxfordshire is bringing in climate lockdowns now. The idea that you can't travel beyond your set district in your car for more than a few times a year. We're going to have councils, I'm afraid, jumped up, drunk on power, making all kinds of crazy rules. Our freedom is going to be less, and we're going to be fleeced for more money to have less freedom. That's my worry.
Honestly, if there's a phrase that makes my blood run cold, Suzanne Evans, it's the idea of local bureaucrats drunk on power. I think you've put the nail in the coffin of this speech.
Well, I'm
convincingly.
afraid I used to be a councillor, so I have come across that, I'm afraid, Beverly. And I think
you were one. You were one. But you see, what about the idea that he said a ban on? No, you would never have been. But a ban on the foreign funding of politics in this country, a ban on MPs' second jobs. These are big changes, Sue, aren't they?
Well, again, yes and no. He's talking about ending the undue influence of wealth and foreign money in politics. Well, let's just look at that first one, influence of wealth. What about the influence of trade unions, who have massive power and in many cases massive wealth as well? I don't see any Labour leader rushing to get rid of the influence of the trade unions in politics, who, let's face it, pretty much vote on block for whoever the next Labour leader is going to be. And as far as banning second jobs, again, it's a great soundbite. But you could argue that MPs benefit from having a second job and being outside those ivory towers of Westminster for a short time, getting outside of that Westminster bubble. And of course, there are some careers. So, for instance, just plucking one out of thin air, if you're a doctor, you need to carry on in medical practice in order to be to maintain your accreditation and to be able to potentially practice again once you may be booted out of office. So I don't think it's a lovely soundbite. It sounds fantastic, but good soundbites make terrible policy.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne Evans there, taking everything that Keir Starmer and Gordon Brown said this morning, screwing it up in her hand, throwing it on the floor, stamping on it, and giving them her clear opinion of what she thinks the country should be doing. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You are all actually in agreement with this idea. Well, as Suzanne said, maybe he's not actually going to scrap the House of Lords. He started out setting out his vision for the future with potentially a little bit of an exaggeration. Jacqueline has said, I agree the House of Lords should be disbanded, not because it was an outdated system. We have to have second chamber of government and law lawmaking. It's a cynical way of creating peers by governments over the last 50 years. We've made it a bloated abomination. And Eileen has said the reason the House of Lords is no longer fit for purpose is because governments have turned it into a retirement home for failed politicians. Another elected House will be stuffed with career politicians who are only interested in short-term gains that will get them re-elected. The whole point of the House of Lords is that its members look at the long-term impact of proposed legislation. Now, please get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Also, our Twitter poll, of course, is saying, do you want to see the House of Lords disbanded or at least reformed if Keir Starmer was to get into number 10? Now, moving on to this story that has been big news over the weekend. This is health officials urging parents to look out for symptoms of scarlet fever in their children following a surge in cases driven by Strep A infections. These bacteria cause other respiratory and skin infections but can be highly infectious. We're going to talk now to Dr. Andrew Preston, microbiologist at the University of Bath. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us this morning. Now, Strep A isn't new, is it? It's a common infection that children often pick up. So should we be more cautious as parents, or is it a bit of fear-mongering on the part of the media?
Difficult to say fear-mongering when you've had these cases of really serious and unfortunately fatal infections. So, of course, what we're seeing is coinciding with a whole series of other respiratory infections. So, unfortunately, they all start with fairly common symptoms. So, for someone to go through the year without a sore throat is, of course, very, very difficult. But not knowing whether it is just the common cold or whether it might turn into either scarlet fever or something far worse. So, of course, parents are going to be concerned when they're seeing it happen around the country at the moment.
So what should parents look out for?
Again, parents will know their kids, so they'll know what they're like, particularly once they reach school age with these more seasonal infections, although perhaps younger kids may not have had quite so many over the last couple of years. But it's really a sore throat that doesn't go away. And then sort of 12, maybe 48 hours after that, scarlet fever is characterised by the rash, starts on the sort of chest and stomach and spreads. It's sort of flushed skin, but it feels quite rough, so often described as sandpaper. So at that point, that's probably an indication that this could be the strep, and we know levels are quite high at the moment, and that's really when you should be looking to seek advice from the GP. At the moment, I think we would prescribe antibiotics, not only to stop the infection from turning into something more nasty, but of course to stop that case from being spread to others, to try and quell the amount of disease we're seeing at the moment.
Now, of course, one theory, and I think it is fairly easy to stack up, is that we took young children who would normally, toddlers and babies who would normally be crawling around the floor and in nurseries and seeding their immune system and their microbiome with all of these different germs and bacteria. We stuck them in houses, we put masks on them, we put hand sanitizer on them, and they've all got immune systems now that are struggling to cope with this situation. What can we do about that as parents?
Very little now, to be honest. We were seeing that kids are being re-exposed to germs and viruses and bacteria as contacts return to normal. So we're going to see a rebound in infections. There's very little we can do about that. But we've had peak years for Group A strep for decades now. 2017, 2018 was perhaps the last high one, and unfortunately, four youngsters died during that year. So this is not something we've never seen before. The seasonality has been disturbed somewhat, so we are now seeing a peak in the autumn, whereas normally we would see it maybe more late winter, early spring. And of course, that's coinciding with the other respiratory infections. That not only perhaps makes it more difficult to spot whether it's a cold or potentially a strep infection, but perhaps it also means you've got higher levels of strep at a time when our airways are under attack and perhaps being disturbed by viral infection more than they would otherwise. So this is something we're just going to have to work our way through, unfortunately.
OK. All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Andrew Preston there, microbiologist at the University of Bath. Right. Let me know what you think of anything you've seen today. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet at GBnews. There's a poll up on Twitter right now. We're asking. Sir Keir Starmer thinks it's time to abolish the House of Lords in his new plan for Britain. At least that's what he said. Suzanne Evans doesn't think it's as clear-cut as that. Do you agree? Well, 69% of you think that he's right. So if he's watching, you can do You might have been doing it, but you can now. Our viewers have given you permission. Keep your votes coming in on that, won't you? Now, after the break, I'm going to be joined with my panel again to go through some of the headlines this morning, including news that midlife health checks are going digital. That's all after this short break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Bev Turner today. Is it Monday? Yes, it's Monday. Amy Nicole, how are you feeling today on a bright new start to the week?
Good. I've got my coffee.
Excellent.
I'm ready to go.
Peter Whittle, not met you before. Lovely to have you here.
Very well.
Right, I don't know whether you saw the papers over the weekend. Yeah. The Mail is serialising the abomination that is the Matt Hancock diaries.
Yes.
Are you a fan of his, Peter?
I don't think you could say that with any justification.
Is anybody? I don't think anybody is.
I think he's, to me, he's a bit of a weasel.
A bit of a weasel. He's
yes.
a weasel.
And, a very mediocre... Well, first of all, he can't write, that's for sure. I mean, these diaries, I've got them here somewhere.
Yeah.
Just these deathless lines, First of all, what price love? I've always known from novels that people will risk everything. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just the sheer banality of it. I think he's a creep, actually.
It's horrific. I know he isn't here to defend himself. Now, the book was ghostwritten with Isabel Oakeshott, presumably from diaries that Hancock was keeping at the time. I don't even know which shocking part to pick first. Amy. What did you think of it? I genuinely thought it's going to be banal, but it's just going to be fairly harmless. It's just going to be... What I did not anticipate is the dripping stupidity that comes out of every single paragraph.
It's like he's trying to create the Matt Hancock Mills and Boone novel, and it actually makes me quite sick.
Yeah.
And for me, a hilarious part is when he went to Boris, and before taking professional advice, he took personal advice. He took personal advice of serial philanderer Boris Johnson about matters of the heart. And when he says, Gina and I, we'd fallen in love, and we'd fallen in love deeply.
Oh,
well, that's fine, isn't it?
The only thing this man is taking any responsibility for is falling in love. Can you take some responsibility for something else, please? One of the bits of this shocked me, and I have to say there are insights. I would never buy this book, but there are insights which are jaw-dropping. For instance, apparently they decided in Cabinet not to put masks on children in schools. Then they heard that Nicola Sturgeon was putting masks on children in schools with all of the damage we now know, and it was obvious to anybody with half a brain that was going to happen. And so they reneged and they U-turned. And he quite clearly admits we had to do this because it's what Nicola Sturgeon was doing.
But don't you think this, every single part of this, he's deflecting blame. That's because of Nicola Sturgeon. And how dare he blame care workers for the decision to put the care home residents back into the care homes. That is appalling. That should have killed any chance of celebrity status, surely.
Absolutely.
This admission for me. He says in this interview that the conversation he had to have about his, kiss and tell, it was the worst conversation of my life. Well, what about the COVID relatives who had to have the worst conversations of their lives, probably through an iPad, to their dying relatives because of mistakes
What about
that
the
Matt
conversation
Hancock
with
made?
Kate Bingham, where Kate Bingham said we don't need to vaccinate everybody indiscriminately regardless of age or health conditions, and he said yes we do, and she wanted to spend 30 million and he said no, we're going to spend 100 million. I mean, there are so many mistakes in this. Peter, I'm going to do a little monologue about this tomorrow, I think, because I need to sit down and get it out of my
But those
system.
are the conversations that should be focused on, not a conversation about, oh, I've snogged my secretary.
Oh, the narcissism
don't try and...
And the other thing about this, I think, is that obviously he's trying to get some kind of career going after politics, and it kind of looks like it might be working.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, we must not let it work.
Well, no, but that's one of the indictments of the way we are now, isn't it, with our culture?
But that's why we need to keep talking about what happened in the care homes.
I agree.
We need to keep talking about those PPE contracts, the 29 million or whatever.
And the damage to children. Right, talking of health, Peter.
Yeah.
Health checks for the midlife, those of us in midlife.
Midlife, yes, that's very, very tactful of you, yes.
The fact that our normal midlife health check is now going to be online instead of seeing your GP. Is this a good move?
I know. I think it's a terrible move, actually, Bev. I really do. I think that the growing digitalisation, the remoteness generally of the medical profession is a shocking development, actually. I mean, any GP worth their salt would tell you, that in fact, quite often there are things that you can tell about someone sitting in front of you. That's part of your training, actually.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I've been in situations like that where a doctor will be very reassuring. You say, well, no, I can tell that it's actually nothing, whatever. They look at certain things. This is being tried out in Cornwall, I believe, and if it's a success, it will be rolled out. Now, what actually would a success look like? In that situation. And the other problem as well is that, what about people? I mean, there are still people around who aren't online, who aren't comfortable using those methods.
Of course.
I think it's terrible.
I mean, I guess you would say, OK, those in their midlife, 50s or so, most people in their 50s are online. But it might be that you are a bit shy and you're not going to mention something over Zoom, or you don't like that kind of... You might be there and say, oh, actually, I've got this funny mole on my arm. While I'm here, would you have a look? It's those incidental...
I think with those types of things, though, because my son recently had a bit of a rash and then they was like, send us photos of it. I think we'll all be in agreement that it's terrible. We really would prefer it to stay as it is. But the reality is, at the moment, the NHS has 133,000 vacancies. 4,000 of those doctors' vacancies. Brexit has been put down to the biggest contributing factor of why these vacancies have come about. And meanwhile, there's 500,000 people out of work, long-term sick. So at the moment, I think the situation of why the NHS is broken, it's not as straightforward as we want to digitise it. I think it's to do with cost, and I think it's to do with the capabilities of what's available within the NHS at the moment.
No, I think that there are other ways you could actually look at the NHS. I'm a supporter of the NHS, always have been, but, I mean, the fact is it is now one of those institutions, probably the only institution, which if you actually seriously talk about trying to change or reform it in some way, you will be cast out, as somehow beyond the pale. That's why no politician will do it. This is not the right way to go.
But you could adequately fund it.
Oh, come on. Now, I think that most people, they throw money at it. They throw more and more money at it. Whether you're Labour supporter or Tory supporter, that can't really be questioned anymore. I mean, even people who are very pro-NHS will say there are real structural problems about the way this thing is run.
But then I think the people at the forefront, the nurses, which is going to make a perfect segue into what we're talking about next.
No, that's changing the goalposts of what we're talking about.
But it's not, because we need to talk about how the people within the NHS are paid and how valued those jobs are, and also the training that goes into those
I would agree with that.
And at the moment, if there's gaping holes in the NHS, if there's almost 150,000 vacancies, is it a surprise that we're having to cut corners and digitise consultations?
Yeah, no, it is the wrong way to do it. And also, it's part of a general trend. I mean, it's part of a general trend. The GPs seem to be extracting themselves from the whole kind of procedure.
I think
the whole process. It's not just about money. You can't keep saying it.
There is so much demands on GPs. I'd say that possibly one GP is doing what used to be the job of 3. So they're just time-saving. They're cutting corners because they're under so much pressure.
Yeah. OK, Peter Whittle, Amy Nicole, we have got more to talk about. We've got to go to the news now, but after the break, Birmingham City Council have given up on their controversial Clear Air Zone fines, as thousands of drivers have got away scot-free. But how? That's coming up after your headlines.
Good morning, it's 11:30. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election, describing the current system as indefensible. So Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party comes into power. Launching a report which was led by the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, he promised to overhaul the way the country's governed. The UK's biggest business group says there'll be a decade of lost economic growth in Britain if action isn't taken by the government. The CBI says it's likely the country's already in recession, with rocketing inflation, negative growth and falling productivity. The Transport Secretary Mark Harper says the RMT's decision to reject an improved pay offer is incredibly disappointing and unfair to the public. A pay rise of 8% and a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024 had been tabled. But the UK's biggest rail union says the deal wouldn't protect its members and would lead to unsafe practices. Meanwhile, 33,000 members of the Fire Brigades Union are voting on industrial action following a 5% pay offer. The FBU says a strike is the last resort, but many firefighters, they say, are desperate, with some struggling to afford to live. England forward Raheem Sterling's flown back to the UK after a burglary at his home. Surrey police says watches and jewellery were stolen, but confirmed the Chelsea winger's family weren't in the house at the time of the robbery. The manager, Gareth Southgate, says family's the most important thing, and he was unable to say whether the footballer would return to Qatar for the rest of the World Cup. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's Bev Turner today on TV, radio and online. Now, more than 45,000 fines issued to drivers since the launch of Birmingham's controversial Clean Air Zone have been written off by the City Council. It was revealed earlier this year that council bosses couldn't deal with the sheer number of fines which needed processing. So helping me to understand this in a little bit more detail is Khalid Mahmood, Labour MP for Perry Barr. Good morning, Khalid. So this sounds like a good news story for motorists who were lumped with a fine they don't now have to pay. What's happened?
Well, this issue has been ongoing for some time. When the scheme started, I had a huge sort of discussion with the member for Transport then, who is no longer the member of Transport. And basically, I pointed all these issues out to them at the time, and it wasn't listened to. It was hurried in to doing this. I don't think all of the support that's there should be in terms of trying to implement this charging system is there. It was originally delayed when it was first put in because they hadn't got it right. But also, I think the real thing is, I pointed out at the time to the cabinet member that this was not a scheme that should be applied to Birmingham because the level of the air quality in Birmingham is below the required 40 microns per cubic meter of nitrate dioxide wasn't enough, wasn't in the system, and therefore there was no need to put it on. So I think because of the fact that they need to look at this properly and resolve this, and I hope now with the change in leadership that they will start to do that and so hopefully move the whole scheme away from Birmingham.
So basically, what I'm guessing is that Birmingham City Council saw this as a way to make a huge amount of money. These are massive cash-generating schemes. You put a fine on a driver just because they're driving at their old car. They were told to buy a diesel car, so they bought a diesel car, and now they're being told they can't drive it. I think this story is actually going to be greeted with a lot of positivity by people here, because doesn't it show that the council were being greedy and they couldn't cope with the number of people who fell into this? Am I right in saying that they were expected to have about 69,000 fines imposed, and then there were nearly 500,000 in the first 8 months? They just couldn't cope with it. How did they get that so wrong?
Well, I did say at the time, as I say, I've been on this for quite a lot of time when it was first implemented, and I said that you got it wrong. They were saying something like 5 to 10% maximum of people will be caught under this. There are a lot more than that that would be caught, and I said that at the time, and they weren't prepared for the volumes that were coming through. It was a rush to try and to catch up perhaps with the cabinet member that was there with London, and the fact that there was no real need. We do need to have better air quality in Birmingham. We want to do that. We can do that by looking at public transport, increasing that, and how we can make that better. And so that's why when it was first put in, I said it was the wrong thing to do. And they hadn't taken all the factors into control. There are a lot of poor people who don't have new cars. And as you said quite rightly, when the diesel incentives were given to people, and a lot of private hire and taxi drivers also caught in this, who've had a very difficult time throughout this as well.
We've heard from Keir Starmer this morning saying he wants to decentralise some of this decision-making process into the local communities. Are you telling me this is a perfect example of where the people on the ground in Birmingham could see this wasn't going to work, but Westminster wanted to push it through?
Well, that's right. It was the government, along with the cabinet member at the time, who really wanted to push it, and they kept pushing. I did write twice to the ministers concerned, and they basically ignored me and said, well, no, this is what the policy is and we're going to go ahead with this. I proved to them that the level of air quality wasn't to the European level, where you need a CAS zone, which is a D, which is a charging zone, and they carried on with it without listening to some of the information. And I think the minister should have looked at that time. Had he been local, I think we should have put more pressure on. But particularly, I think the people in charge locally, certainly the cabinet member charged locally, was rushing ahead with this because he wanted some political stars for doing it. And I think now he realised he was wrong.
Well, it's an embarrassment for them. Thank you, Khalid Mahmood, there, Labour MP for Perry Barr. So 400,000 more fines than expected were generated in the first 8 months, and it still made £20 million for them, despite the fact that lots of drivers challenged them and didn't have to pay them. Wow. Right, OK, moving on. Football. England progressed to the World Cup quarter-finals last night, didn't they? Comfortable 3-0 victory over Senegal. England fans were out in droves in pubs and fan zones. Our reporter Will Hollis decided to join the party.
It might be 4 degrees, but a Winter World Cup isn't all that bad.
Nice and cold out here, but I'm sure it's warm there.
I'm excited to see Phil Foden and Jack Grealish.
I've got my gloves, so warm me up, got the bib. Doesn't matter what the weather is. Doesn't matter. It's England, isn't it?
We could do a gazebo, though.
We could do a gazebo.
It's not the cold that's got England fans shivering at the Trent Navigation in Nottingham. There's a different kind of tension in the knockout stages. The Lions may have finished top of their group, but Senegal are champions in Africa.
I'd like to think we can win 2-0. 1-0 will do.
If we attack with a bit of freedom tonight, I think we'll do perfectly fine.
They're going to win the first half, lose the second half, but win the match.
What does that mean?
They're going to win.
A sluggish start, but then England find their feet. Once, and then again in the first half.
We've got 2 in the bag. I'm feeling positive. I'm calm now. I hope we win 5-0.
I went to the toilet twice and missed both of them. I'm really not happy about it. But it's coming home, so it don't matter.
As the beer flows, so do the goals. The ending is inevitable now. England 3, Senegal 0.
We won, we're through to the next round. I was confident, and the boys, they performed.
England march on with old rivals in sight. The last time they played France in a World Cup, England won. That was 1982. This time, France are reigning champions.
We're going to play France, we're going to beat them, man. If we go toe-to-toe with them, then we'll beat them. If we go defensive, then we'll lose.
But for now, that doesn't stop the singing. Will Hollis for GB News in Nottingham.
Brings out the funny in people, doesn't it, Amy Nicole? Are you a football fan?
I'm a footballer fan.
Oh, yeah.
But not really
Any
a football
particular
fan.
footballer?
Jack Grealish, for sure. And I quite like Jordan Henderson at the moment.
Oh, OK, but not for their tactical skill and
ability. They've got great ball skills, I'm sure. Put it in the back of any net.
Peter Whittle, how do you follow that?
Yeah, exactly, ball skills. I I like watching when England are doing well. I like it. The only thing I'm always slightly aware of, there comes a point where suddenly we seem to fall apart. Dare I say it? And you know, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Good luck to them.
Even if you're not a massive football fan, when something like the World Cup comes around, I sat there last night on the sofa taking a few notes, and then they score, and you go, yes! And you think, oh, I do care.
Yeah.
Right, Amy, strikes. This is something we all care about. Nadeem Zahawi has said that they are unfair at Christmas. How dare they strike at Christmas?
Yes, the man who used public money to heat his stables, man of the people Nadeem Zahawi, has come out and said it is the unions that are ruining Christmas by daring to go on strike. I think support those who have the courage to ask. No action means conditions will stay the same. I support the strikes, and I think Nadeem Zahawi would use his energy better to sit around a negotiation table rather than just talk about them behind the back and put them as the Grinch that stole Christmas, when I would argue the government are stealing Christmas.
Are there some occupations that you are more sympathetic about striking than others? What about the transport, the mail, the nurses?
Well, I think the fact that there is a remarkable number of industries now going on strike really does show the state of this. And I think if we, as the people, had faith in the government and we couldn't personally see that a lot of these industries are crumbling and breaking before our very eyes, for instance, we just discussed the NHS there, and we can see the problems there, then I think, yes, the government would have a case to be able to say, look how they're ruining Christmas. But when you can see the state of these industries and the impact on the people who are working to keep our country going, and did so throughout COVID, then public opinion this time round is certainly with the strikers.
Now, Peter, Zahawi has said that this is President Putin's fault because of the war in Ukraine. It's sent energy costs soaring. It's the main driver of rising prices and pressure on pay.
I mean, that's just simply ridiculous.
Isn't it? Thank you.
It's ridiculous and desperate talk, actually. I'm sort of with Amy a bit on this. I don't like this immediate condemnation. As for Christmas, you know, it's almost like, well, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to strike at a kind of a time that's going to have no effect?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, also, there is this talk, you've always had it in the Tory party, that somehow there are certain people who shouldn't strike, emergencies and things like that. I don't like the idea of working people having any rights taken away, actually.
No. It's really important to note that with these strikes within the NHS, they have said throughout that there will be a Christmas Day service. It won't be the case that the emergency department is just left barren. It will be completely functioning for those who need it, but it's just the extra staff.
Isn't it, Amy, as well, though, because of lockdowns and furloughs, people have got quite lazy now. No one wants to go to work anymore. The idea that they could just sit at home.
No, I wouldn't agree with that, because 40% of people claiming benefits are in work. Also, we have, as we mentioned earlier, a big backlog of those long-term sick as a result of potentially COVID. So there are a lot of people who are legitimately out of work. We also have the most unaffordable childcare in the UK. That puts a big chunk of parents who would be working out the workforce, because it can't pay. If you've got nursery fees and a minimum wage job, that does not equal.
It's very difficult, no doubt.
But they are different. There are different topics. I mean, there is something.
No, that's the reason people are out of work.
No, hang on. We're talking about strikes, right? And I said what I think about that. With the 5 million people economically inactive, no, I think a lot of people decided they didn't quite want to go back.
Yeah.
Right? I'm very sceptical of this kind of long COVID thing anyway. There is something seriously wrong if people who pay taxes and go to work are essentially supporting 5.3 million people who are economically inactive. I also know that purely from anecdotally, actually, that many people are better off on benefits than working.
Of course.
Well, that's a
better
massive
off.
problem. And the fact that working people have to claim benefits, that shows a real problem in the system. But can we just go back to strikes for 1 second? Because they've been very effective throughout history and also very recently. So we all remember the criminal barristers' strike. That is over since October because they negotiated. They got together, negotiated, and they had 15% pay rise. London bus drivers, 11% pay rise. BA staff, 13%. These are solved, closed, done. No one's spoiling Christmas. So it can be dealt with. This is at the door of the government.
Well, I think what Zahawi's particularly concerned with about the fact that this is Christmas. He's saying, you know, it's the fact that it will be disrupting family travel plans, particularly the trains. You know, one of the Twitter poll questions we nearly did today, we might do tomorrow, do you feel you can, when you leave your house, are you going to get to your place of your destination, because I feel like the moment you walk out of the house, you can't be sure that your car's going to get there because the traffic is so bad. The trains aren't running, the buses are terrible.
Yeah, but I totally agree with that, Bev. Those are about basically the place falling apart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to sound glib there, but that is slightly different. Yes, for example, coming here today, I got the train from where I live, and you factor in about another 45 minutes simply because you can't rely on such a thing as a timetable anymore. It's just generally things are not working. It does feel remarkably like the 1970s. However, I don't think that one can put that at the foot of the unions necessarily.
However,
it's a different thing.
you say things are falling apart. Well, they're not falling apart for the shareholders who have made record profits. Until we put an end to profiteering and we treat staff with the dignity and the respect that they deserve, these strikes are going to continue because people can't afford. There are nurses at the moment using food banks. How is that correct in any? We're one of the richest nations in the world.
No, but I think I was making a different point there, Amy. I mean, who can possibly disagree with kind of what you say there? I think the fact is that there are so many the rot is so deep in our sort of structural decay. That is a whole different thing, which basically governments have to take on. They won't, they never do, but at least for this particular Conservative government. But I think it's quite separate, to get back to the original point, to unions and what's happening there.
OK, right. Harry and Meghan, photo.
That delightful couple.
Andrew.
That
Gear
delightful
change.
couple that we all like to talk about. Yes, they are... What has emerged, Bev, as you've probably seen this in the papers this morning, they used an image in this trailer, which has almost become more, this legendary trailer of these photographers.
A global event.
Saying that this is just terrible, this is the pressure we're under. In fact, it was taken at a premiere of a Harry Potter movie back in 2005.
So
that's quite a bit. That's a good. What is it now? 7 years before they got they even got married. So it's basically they're using a wrong image. I think that OK, that's a small point. You don't actually have to even pick this kind of stuff up to discredit them. Actually, I think they're doing a very good job of that on their own. I think that they are the most self-indulgent, narcissistic, whiny, privileged couple. And I think, frankly, I don't know why the King has not stripped them of the titles yet. He absolutely should, because that's the only thing. That's the only thing keeping them commercial. They need those titles.
But he'll be torn between being a father and being the king, and he won't want to completely estrange himself from his son yet, although this Netflix documentary, which is what this trailer is for, is going to stretch the bounds of that relationship beyond all recognition, isn't it, Amy?
I guess, yes. But can we, if I want to talk about that trailer, I think this has been blown completely out of proportion, because you know what that is. That's an editing. They've just typed in lots of paparazzi and it's come up with that image. So they've just used it to illustrate what lots of paparazzi is. I don't think this is misleading. I think this to pick this story up and push it with so fervently is all a bit part of the Meghan and Harry smear campaign, dare I say.
So just to be really clear what that means. So
smear
basically,
campaign.
the trailer for Netflix, the trailer for the series says, look how hounded we are by a wall of
paparazzi. This is
so
what paparazzi look like.
Yeah, so here we are. This is the paparazzi, the wall of paparazzi that we face. And then it transpires that the image used in their trailer, which presumably they had sign-off from, was an event that they were at willingly, a red carpet event.
But I think this is just some editor sitting there typing into Getty Images paparazzi and seeing which one looked the most effective for that moment.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the big deal that it's being made out to be, personally. There are bigger fish to fry.
Well, they certainly have. And I think, that you're quite right. Okay, as I said at the very beginning, it is just an image. But it's sort of emblematic of their general kind of campaign.
Hypocrisy is what it smells like.
Yeah,
People
it's hypocrisy.
think it smells of
shocking,
lack of
high-minded, they're moralistic, all the things, that basically turn people away from from Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
I remember when there was the royal wedding, right, the level of goodwill towards them was extraordinary, right? They managed to turn it round into saying, well, this country is appalling, Britain is appalling, racist, all the rest of it. There was extraordinary goodwill towards both of them. And I think that from what I can gather with this new documentary, they're even going to have a go at Britain you know,
The British people needed to be, apparently we needed
I
to
think
taught
this
a
is
lesson.
just outrageous.
Do you not think the tide turned very quickly after the royal wedding in a way that it perhaps wouldn't have if Meghan looked like and had the heritage of Kate Middleton?
No, it's absolutely...
I think people were ready.
Only people who want to see that about the royal family will say that.
Yeah.
Because basically it wasn't the case. They were welcomed with absolute open arms. I mean, you know, and the fact is that it was basically preaching to people about the climate and what else have you. Also, that kind of that sort of virtue signalling, which they perfected to an art form. You know, that is what turned people off.
I think you're right. How do you say that is virtue signalling? Because I don't think there's anything virtue signalling about what they do, because they follow through on everything they do, and they've done amazing work for humanitarian aid. They've done wonderful things for mental health. Their Archwell Foundation raises more money for causes around the world than any celebrity would put their name to.
Do you know how much money is raised by members of the royal family for charities day in, day out, year in, year out? That's their job. Yes, but they're never given credit for it. But somehow or other, they make sure, these people make sure that we hear everything about every good deed. Also, there's an old rule, Amy, you know, never trust somebody who makes a claim about themselves. And if they say, I am a compassionate person, or I am a kind person, you should immediately think, be wary of that one.
Yeah. But I don't think they do. I think they actually keep quite quiet about a lot of the humanitarian stuff that they do, which is why we get caught up with stories about, like, a random photograph in their trailer, rather than talking about what they did in Rwanda, what they did for the women of Afghanistan. You don't even know about that because no one talks about that.
We do. I think they make absolutely quite clear, I think, what they do for charity. And they also... At the same time, what is appalling about they somehow or other paint themselves as victims. That's the whole woke ideology there. You do all of this, and yet somehow you're still victims. You're crying in the trailer.
But it is
you're doing this, you're doing that.
To experience
they have
trauma,
a life of great privilege.
A great privilege in terms of
opportunity. They could do it with such
We've all had trauma.
But that's material privilege, and I wouldn't like it to be mistaken that with material privilege doesn't come the possibility for trauma. He lost his mother when he was 13 and had to walk behind her coffin in front of the world's press.
Yes, all right, but I mean...
I'm so sorry. We could talk about Meghan and Harry all day.
Who's saying that
we had our Twitter poll.
They're not exempt from trauma.
Amy Nicole, Peter Whittle, I'm so sorry. Now, we had our Twitter poll today asking you, based on what Keir Starmer said this morning about whether you want him to abolish the House of Lords, and 69% of you have said yes.
Yay!
Right, we have come to the end of our show. It has flown by again. Coming up next is GB News Day with Mark Longhurst. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's cold out there and it's going to turn even colder this week. But for today, it's cloudy for many. Some showers around, similar locations to the last couple of days. Those showers coming in on an easterly breeze affecting mainly southeast Scotland into eastern England, some making their way into the Midlands and parts of Wales, as well as parts of Northern Ireland, one or two running along the south coast. Otherwise, the further west you are, the drier and brighter it will be. The best of the sunshine western Scotland, but wherever you are, it's going to be feeling cold. 4 to 8 degrees. When you add on that easterly breeze, it's going to feel more like 2 or 3 Celsius. Into the evening, the showers continue for a time. They're going to push through parts of central England into Wales. They're going to tend to disappear from Northern Ireland as well as the south coast. The winds turn more to a northerly across Scotland. They'll bring showers increasingly into the north of Scotland, and those showers will turn sleety by the end of the night. But it's a cold night everywhere. Temperatures in the low single figures or just below freezing in some spots. Then, later Tuesday, a change on the way. We lose the easterly and we gain a northerly, which is even colder at the moment. That northerly coming straight from the Arctic, and that's the weather we've got for the rest of the week. So it's going to turn progressively colder after a chilly start on